The Cleveland Browns just detonated a bomb that sent shockwaves through the entire NFL, and Shedeur Sanders' reaction to the carnage is absolutely jaw-dropping. Kevin Stefanski, the two-time Coach of the Year who gave Sanders his first real shot in the NFL, was fired on Black Monday in a move that stunned absolutely nobody except apparently the Browns players themselves. And when Sanders finally broke his silence just seconds after learning the news, what he revealed about how the organization handled the firing, what he said about his own future, and the message he sent to the entire league was so brutally honest and so shockingly cold that it's forcing everyone to question whether this young quarterback even has a future in Cleveland. But it gets even more explosive because Sanders' father, Deion, posted a cryptic message on social media within minutes of the firing that has everyone speculating about what's really going on behind the scenes. General Manager Andrew Berry refused to commit to Sanders as the 2026 starter despite his improvement down the stretch. Sources are now revealing that some teams are wondering if the Browns will trade Sanders before he even gets a second season. And the most shocking part, Sanders himself admitted on camera that his fate is completely out of his hands, and you could see in his eyes that he knows exactly what's coming. This is the complete untold story of how a rookie quarterback's NFL career is hanging by a thread, and the brutal truth bomb he just dropped that has the entire football world talking. If you want the latest breaking news and insider information on all the NFL drama as it unfolds, smash that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications because this situation is about to get even crazier. Let's rewind to Black Monday, January 6th, 2026, the day everything changed for the Cleveland Browns and Shedeur Sanders. The season had ended just one day earlier with a dramatic 20-18 victory over the Cincinnati Bengals, a game where Sanders went 11 of 22 for 111 yards with a lost fumble. It wasn't pretty, but it was a win, and it moved the Browns to 5-12 on the season. Sanders had finished his rookie campaign going 3-4 as a starter across 7 games, throwing for 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, with a completion percentage of just 56.6%. His total QBR of 19.0 ranked 5th worst among nearly 700 quarterbacks in the QBR era since 2006. Those numbers told one story, but the eye test told another. Sanders had shown flashes of brilliance, the deep ball accuracy, the mobility, the ability to extend plays with his feet. He'd also shown the mistakes of a rookie, holding the ball too long, drifting in the pocket, making ill-advised throws under pressure. But the Browns had seen enough progress that heading into the offseason, many believed Sanders would get a real opportunity to compete for the starting job in 2026 with a full training camp and a better supporting cast around him. That belief was shattered the moment the Browns announced Kevin Stefanski had been fired. Stefanski, who had been with Cleveland for 6 seasons, led the team to 2 playoff appearances and won Coach of the Year awards in 2020 and 2023, was out after finishing 45-56 overall with the franchise. The firing itself wasn't shocking. 5-12, followed by 3-14 the year before, made Stefanski's position untenable despite his past success. Owner Jimmy Haslam and GM Andrew Berry had made it clear that the current trajectory was unacceptable and a fresh start was needed. What was shocking? Absolutely stunning, actually, was how the players found out about it. And Shedeur Sanders, in his end-of-season media availability that took place just minutes after Stefanski was let go, revealed something that exposed the complete dysfunction of the Cleveland Browns organization in a way that nobody expected. When reporters asked Sanders for his reaction to the Stefanski firing, Sanders dropped a bombshell that should terrify every Browns fan. He said, and this is a direct quote, "We just found out a couple seconds ago." Think about that for a moment. The players, the guys who had just finished playing their hearts out for Stefanski less than 24 hours earlier, learned about their head coach being fired at the exact same time as the media and the public. Sanders then went even further, revealing something even more damning about the organization. When asked how the players found out, Sanders said, I think social media informed the players first. Let that sink in. The Cleveland Browns didn't have the decency or the professionalism to inform their own players that the head coach had been fired before making it public. The players were scrolling through Twitter or Instagram and saw the news break in real time, along with everyone else in the world. That's not just poor communication. That's organizational malpractice. That's a franchise that has no respect for its players, no understanding of how to handle personnel decisions, and no clue about building a winning culture. And Sanders, to his credit, called it out in the most understated but devastating way possible. But Sanders' reaction didn't stop there, and what he said next revealed everything you need to know about where his head is at and how he views his precarious situation in Cleveland. When reporters asked him about his thoughts on Stefanski's departure, Sanders' response was ice cold and brutally pragmatic. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I think it's just overall the mentality. Things are going to happen. That's just how the league is. And moving forward, just focus on what we can improve on individually for the next head coach." Notice the language Sanders used. Things are going to happen. That's just how the league is. Focus on what we can improve on individually. This wasn't a young quarterback expressing gratitude for his coach, or sadness about the change, or even optimism about the future. This was a player who has already been hardened by the NFL, who understands that loyalty means nothing, that relationships are transactional, and that survival in this league requires focusing on yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. The word individually is particularly telling, not what we can improve on as a team, not how we can build together. Individually, every man for himself. That's the mentality Sanders has adopted after just one season in Cleveland. Sanders was also asked specifically whether team owner Jimmy Haslam had addressed the team about the Stefanski firing, and Sanders' response was perhaps the most shocking moment of the entire press conference. He declined to answer. He looked directly at the reporter, paused for a beat, and then moved on to the next question without saying a word. That silence was deafening. If Haslam had addressed the team, if the owner had shown any kind of leadership or provided any clarity about the organization's direction, Sanders would have said so. The fact that he refused to answer suggests that either Haslam didn't address the team at all, which would be a massive failure of leadership, or Haslam said something that Sanders didn't want to repeat publicly, which might be even worse. Either way, Sanders' refusal to engage with that question was a masterclass in saying everything by saying nothing, and it painted a picture of an organization in complete disarray. But the most heartbreaking moment of Sanders' press conference came when he was asked point blank whether he believed he'd done enough to prove he could be the Browns' franchise quarterback going forward. Sanders, who throughout his college career at Jackson State and Colorado had never lacked for confidence, who had always carried himself with the swagger of someone who knew he was destined for greatness, gave an answer that was equal parts confident and resigned. He said, "I think I did what I was able to do, and I definitely grew from a lot of things, and I got experience now, so I'm always the same, confidence-wise. I'm there. But that's not in my hands. That's not my decision. I can't speak on what other people feel." The confidence was still there. Sanders still believes in himself, still knows he can play at this level. But the resignation in those words, "That's not in my hands. That's not my decision. I can't speak on what other people feel." That was the sound of a young quarterback who knows he's fighting against forces beyond his control. Sanders has no power in this situation. He can't control whether the Browns draft a quarterback in the first round. He can't control whether they sign a veteran free agent. He can't control whether the new head coach believes in him or wants to bring in his own guy. All Sanders can do is work, improve, and hope that it's enough. And based on everything that happened on Black Monday, hope might not be sufficient. Before we get into what GM Andrew Berry said about Sanders' future, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, or more accurately, the prime time in the room. Less than 1 hour after the news of Kevin Stefanski's firing went public, Deion Sanders, Shedeur's father and the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, posted something on social media that immediately went viral and had everyone speculating about whether it was connected to the Browns situation. Deion wrote, and I'm quoting directly here, "We're going to make it.
Please get that in your heart, your spirit, and your way of living. It's 2026, and that means it's a new year, therefore it's time for new things. A whole new mindset is warranted and must be established right now. We're going to win this game of life. Hashtag Coach Prime. Now, Deion didn't mention Kevin Stefanski by name. He didn't reference the Browns directly, but the timing, less than 60 minutes after the firing was announced, and the language, it's time for new things, a whole new mindset is warranted, we're going to win this game of life, all of it felt incredibly pointed. Was Deion sending a message to his son that this firing could be the fresh start Shedeur needs? Was he subtly calling out the Browns organization for how they handled the situation? Was he hinting that maybe Shedeur's future isn't in Cleveland at all? We don't know for certain, but what we do know is that Deion Sanders doesn't post anything without intention, and the fact that he felt compelled to say something so quickly after the Stefanski news broke suggests he's very much involved in how his son is processing this moment. Now let's talk about what GM Andrew Berry said in his end-of-season press conference, because his comments about Shedeur Sanders were a masterclass in saying just enough to be encouraging while leaving the door wide open to replace him. Berry started by praising Sanders' progress, saying they saw a lot of improvement both mentally and physically, that Sanders showed good playmaking ability, accuracy, and the ability to extend plays with his feet. Berry even gave Sanders credit for improving his pocket management and situational awareness as the season progressed. All of that sounded positive, like a GM who believed in his young quarterback and wanted to build around him. But then came the hammer. Berry said, and this is crucial, that all being said, we're going to do our work on the quarterback market. It's too important of a position, and it's something that has to be solidified. I can't sit here and tell you today whether the solution for or the starter in 2026 is internal or external, but it's something that we're going to work through over the next several weeks. Translation, Shedeur Sanders is not the unquestioned starter for 2026. We're exploring all our options, draft, free agency, trades, everything. And the new head coach, whoever that ends up being, will have significant input into that decision. For Sanders, that statement had to sting. He just spent 7 games earning the starting job, showing improvement week over week, leading the Browns to victories in his final 2 starts of the season, and his general manager couldn't even commit to him publicly as the starter heading into year 2. That lack of endorsement, especially combined with the Browns holding 2 first-round picks, including the 6th overall selection, sent a very clear message. You're on thin ice, kid, and you'd better be perfect this offseason, or we're moving on. Berry's comments also confirmed something that Sanders himself had acknowledged. The new head coach would have massive input into the quarterback decision. Berry said the new coach would have a lot of input, and that it was important to make sure the offense is run and developed well. This is where things get really dicey for Sanders, because whoever the Browns hire as head coach is going to walk into a situation where they have options. They can roll with Sanders and try to develop him in year 2. They can draft a quarterback in the first round with that 6th overall pick. They can sign a veteran free agent like Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields or Sam Darnold. They can trade for a young quarterback who's available on the market. And most dangerously for Sanders, they can convince themselves that they need to make their own pick at the position rather than being stuck with the previous regime's 5th-round project. History is littered with young quarterbacks who got thrown out with the bathwater when a new coaching staff came in. Sanders knows this, Berry knows this, and that's why Sanders' repeated acknowledgement that his future is not in his hands felt so ominous. But here's where the story takes an even shocking turn, because according to CBS Sports NFL insider Jonathan Jones, the Browns are actually preparing for Sanders to be their starter in 2026. Jones reported that sources say the Browns are hoping to build around Sanders and get better results in year 2. But here's the catch, and it's a massive one. Jones also noted that sources have said a coach with options may not have the Browns high on his list, and that any potential coach will need to believe in Sanders. So the Browns want Sanders to be the starter, but only if they can find a coach who believes in him. And if they can't find that coach, or if the coach they hire doesn't think Sanders is the answer, then all bets are off. It's a circular logic nightmare that leaves Sanders in complete limbo. He's the presumed starter until he's not. He's the guy they're building around until they decide to draft his replacement. He's the future of the franchise until a new coach walks in and says he isn't. This is organizational dysfunction at its finest, and Sanders is caught right in the middle of it.
Jones's report also included another bombshell that should terrify Sanders. He wrote, "Some league sources have wondered if Cleveland would look to deal one of them come next season," referring to either Sanders or fellow rookie Dillon Gabriel. The fact that teams around the league are already speculating about whether the Browns will trade one of their young quarterbacks less than 1 year after drafting them shows you just how unstable this situation really is. Sanders could go from being the Browns' starter in December 2025 to being traded to another team by April 2026. It sounds insane, but this is the Cleveland Browns we're talking about, a franchise that has started 37 different quarterbacks since 1999, that gave Baker Mayfield the keys to the franchise and then traded him 3 years later, that handed Deshaun Watson $230 million fully guaranteed and has gotten 19 starts out of him in over 3 years. Dysfunction isn't a bug for this organization, it's a feature, and Shedeur Sanders is learning that lesson the hard way. Let's talk about Sanders' rookie season in context because it's important to understand what he actually accomplished and why the Browns' lack of commitment to him is so frustrating. Sanders didn't get his first start until Week 12, after both Joe Flacco and Dillon Gabriel had failed to establish themselves as viable options. Flacco had been traded mid-season to Cincinnati after struggling mightily. Gabriel went 1-5 in 6 starts before suffering a concussion that opened the door for Sanders. So Sanders was essentially coming off the bench in mid-November to take over a 5-6 team that was spiraling toward another lost season. The offensive line was decimated, with only one Week 1 starter, left guard Joel Bitonio, still in the lineup. Sanders was pressured on 44.1% of his dropbacks, the second highest rate in the entire NFL. The Browns' offense ranked 31st in scoring, at just 16.4 points per game. Sanders had virtually no weapons at receiver, with rookie Isaiah Bond being his most consistent target. This was not a situation set up for success. This was a situation designed to expose a young quarterback's weaknesses and test his mental toughness. And while Sanders' statistics weren't pretty, he showed enough flashes of talent to justify optimism about his development. In his first start against the Las Vegas Raiders, Sanders completed 11 of 20 passes for 209 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception in a 24-10 victory. He hit that deep ball to Isaiah Bond for over 50 yards that showed off his arm talent and accuracy. In Week 14 against the Tennessee Titans, Sanders had his best statistical performance of the season, going 24 of 39 for 364 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 31-27 victory. He looked like a legitimate franchise quarterback that day, making plays with his arm and his legs, leading the Browns to a much-needed win. Yes, there were also games where Sanders struggled mightily. His debut against Baltimore was a disaster, 4 of 16 for 47 yards and an interception in a loss. He threw 10 interceptions over 7 starts, tied for the most in the league despite playing fewer games than anyone else in that category. He fumbled multiple times. He took unnecessary sacks. He made rookie mistakes. But the trajectory was upward, and that's what should matter to the Browns. Sanders finished the season with back-to-back wins over Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, both division rivals, showing that he could handle pressure situations and deliver when it mattered most. And yet, Andrew Berry still won't commit to him publicly as the 2026 starter. The draft looms large over all of this because the Browns currently hold the 6th overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, and depending on how the board falls, they could have a shot at one of the top quarterback prospects in the class. Indiana's Fernando Mendoza just won the Heisman Trophy and is the consensus #1 quarterback in the draft. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, with exceptional accuracy and poise in big moments. If Mendoza is somehow available at 6, which seems unlikely but not impossible, the Browns would face enormous pressure to take him. Oregon's Dante Moore, if he declares, has that effortless arm talent and mobility that draws comparisons to C.J. Stroud. Alabama's Ty Simpson is young but talented with a huge upside.
Any of these players could be available when the Browns pick, and any of them would represent a very real threat to Sanders' job security. The Browns also possess the Jacksonville Jaguars' first-round pick from a previous trade, giving them 2 first-rounders to potentially package together if they wanted to trade up for a quarterback. The draft capital is there, the need at quarterback has been established by Barry's non-committal comments, and the new coaching staff will have input into the decision. All of those factors combine to create a scenario where Sanders could very easily be replaced before he ever gets a real chance to prove himself. But it's not just the draft that threatens Sanders, it's also the free agent and trade markets. Barry specifically mentioned they would explore external veteran options, which is GM speak for "we're going to kick the tires on every available quarterback." Kirk Cousins could be cut or traded by Atlanta after underperforming on a massive contract. Justin Fields is entering a contract year in Pittsburgh and might be available if the Steelers decide to rebuild. Daniel Jones was benched by the Giants mid-season and is looking for a fresh start. Sam Darnold revived his career in Minnesota and could be a free agent if the Vikings go in a different direction. Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, all veterans who could be available and would give the Browns a safe, known commodity instead of rolling with Sanders' development. And then there's Deshaun Watson, who according to Andrew Barry is expected to be on the 2026 roster. Watson hasn't played since October 2024 and required 2 surgeries on his Achilles, but his fully guaranteed contract means the Browns can't just cut him without taking a devastating cap hit. So Watson will be in camp, competing for a job, taking up a roster spot and a significant portion of the salary cap, adding yet another layer of uncertainty to the quarterback room. Sanders could walk into training camp in 2026 and find himself competing against Watson, Gabriel, a drafted rookie, and a veteran free agent, all while trying to impress a new coaching staff that didn't draft him and owes him nothing. That's a nightmare scenario for any young quarterback. Sanders' relationship with Kevin Stefanski adds another complex layer to this story, because while many fans and media members criticize Stefanski for how he handled Sanders throughout the season, Sanders himself was diplomatic and even gracious when discussing his now former head coach. After the Bengals game, Sanders said he and Stefanski had grew to understand each other during the season. Sanders explained, "We would share different things that we would both go through. I know he wanted this win, and I know he wants every win, but I know that this one means a lot. I wish we all played as a team, and I wish we could have done more personally within this last year." That statement, "I wish we all played as a team," felt like a subtle indictment of something, though Sanders never explicitly said what. Was he suggesting there were chemistry issues, locker room divisions, a lack of cohesion between offense and defense? We don't know, but the phrasing was notable. Sanders also acknowledged that playing under Stefanski in year 1 was an adjustment, saying it was the first time he'd had a head coach other than his father, Deion. Sanders said, "So that was the adjustment off rip, and it was cool, it was straight, like building different relationships in different circumstances, situations, which is always good to have those life goals and have those life lessons, just to have them on building blocks, so then you're prepared for any situation. So that's what this last year was." Sanders is framing his rookie season as a learning experience, a necessary step in his development as a professional. That's the mature, long-term view, but the short-term reality is that Stefanski is gone, and Sanders now has to build yet another new relationship with yet another new head coach, this time with even less job security and even more pressure to perform immediately. The coaching search itself will be fascinating to watch because whoever the Browns hire will essentially be deciding Shedeur Sanders' fate. If they hire an offensive-minded coach like Ben Johnson from Detroit or Shane Steichen from Indianapolis, someone who has a track record of developing young quarterbacks, that could bode well for Sanders. Those coaches might look at Sanders' tape, see the potential, and believe they can unlock it with better scheme design and better player development. But if the Browns hire a defensive coach or a head coach who wants to bring in his own offensive coordinator with a specific system, that coach might look at Sanders and see a square peg that doesn't fit their round hole. They might decide they need a different kind of quarterback, someone who fits their vision, and Sanders would be out before he ever get a chance to prove himself in the new system. Kevin Stefanski's firing, in many ways, was expected and probably necessary given the Browns' recent results, but for Sanders, it represents the loss of the one coach who actually gave him a chance, who believed in him enough to make him the starter for the final 7 games, despite intense pressure from fans and media to stick with veterans or draft a quarterback earlier. Now Sanders has to start over, prove himself all over again, and hope the next coach sees what Stefanski eventually saw.
There's also the broader context of the Browns' organizational dysfunction that has to be considered when evaluating Sanders' situation. This is a franchise that has been a graveyard for young quarterbacks for decades. Since returning to the NFL in 1999, the Browns have started 37 different quarterbacks. Tim Kutch, Brady Quinn, Brandon Weeden, Johnny Manziel, Deshaun Kaiser, Baker Mayfield, all of them came to Cleveland with promise and left with their careers damaged or destroyed. The common denominator isn't the quarterbacks, it's the organization. The Browns cycle through coaches and general managers so frequently that no one gets a chance to build anything sustainable. They make impulsive decisions driven by ownership that has no patience and no clear vision. They prioritize headlines over substance, which is how they ended up with the Deshaun Watson contract that has hamstrung them financially. Jimmy Haslam, who has owned the team since 2012, has had 9 different head coaches and 5 general managers during his tenure. That's not a franchise committed to building a winner. That's a franchise addicted to chaos, and Shedeur Sanders is the latest victim of that addiction. The most damning evidence of the Browns' dysfunction came in Sanders' revelation that social media informed the players about Stefanski's firing before the organization did. Think about what that means operationally. It means that Barry and Haslam made the decision to fire Stefanski probably over the weekend or Monday morning. They agreed on the timing and the messaging. They prepared a public statement. They coordinated with their PR team to announce it on social media and through official channels. And at no point during that entire process did anyone think, hey, maybe we should tell the players first. Maybe we should have a team meeting where we explain the decision and give them a chance to process it before the entire world knows. That's not just poor communication. That's a fundamental lack of respect for the players who just spent an entire season grinding for this organization. How is Sanders supposed to trust the Browns to make the right decisions about his career when they can't even handle a basic coaching change with professionalism and decency? How is any player supposed to give maximum effort for an organization that treats them as an afterthought? The answer is they can't, and they won't, and that's why the Browns will continue to lose until they fix their broken organizational culture. Sanders' focus on improving individually rather than talking about team goals or collective improvement is telling because it suggests he's already internalized the lesson that in Cleveland you have to look out for yourself. There's no collective vision, no long-term plan, no sense of everyone pulling in the same direction. It's every man for himself, and the smart players understand that early and adjust their mentality accordingly. Sanders has adjusted. He's going to spend the offseason working on his game, improving his mechanics, studying film, building chemistry with whoever his receivers will be next year. But he's not going to waste time or energy worrying about things he can't control, like whether the Browns will draft a quarterback or sign a veteran or trade him to another team. That's not his decision to make, as he repeatedly emphasized in his press conference. All he can do is put himself in the best position possible and hope it's enough. But hope, as we've established, might not be sufficient in an organization as dysfunctional as the Cleveland Browns. Let's talk about what happens next, because the next 4 months will determine everything for Shedeur Sanders and the Browns franchise. First, they need to hire a head coach, and that process has already begun with multiple candidates being mentioned in media reports. Stefanski himself is reportedly a candidate for other openings with the Giants, Falcons, and Titans, which is ironic given that he was just fired by Cleveland. The Browns will likely target an offensive coach, someone who can stabilize the quarterback position and develop Sanders, or whoever ends up being the starter. Names like Ben Johnson, Shane Steichen, and others will be discussed, and whoever gets the job will immediately become the most important person in Shedeur Sanders' professional life.
That coach will evaluate Sanders, determine whether he fits their system, decide whether to commit to developing him or move in a different direction. Sanders has no say in who gets hired, and he has no guarantee that whoever does get hired will believe in him. That's a terrifying position for any player to be in. Second, the Browns have to navigate the draft. They currently hold the 6th overall pick and the Jacksonville Jaguars pick later in the first round. Depending on how the draft boards shake out and whether quarterbacks like Dante Moore and Simon Simpson declare, the Browns could have multiple opportunities to draft a signal caller. If Fernando Mendoza is available at 6, which seems unlikely but not impossible, the pressure to take him will be enormous. He just won the Heisman. He's the consensus top quarterback in the class, and passing on him to stick with a 5th-round pick who went 3-4 as a rookie would be a massive statement of faith in Sanders. Can you see Jimmy Haslam, the owner who pushed for Johnny Manziel and Deshaun Watson, passing on a Heisman-winning quarterback at pick 6? Can you see Andrew Berry, who just refused to commit to Sanders publicly, convincing his owner not to draft a potential franchise quarterback when one falls to them? It seems unlikely, which means Sanders is probably facing competition from a rookie, whether he likes it or not. Third, the free agent and trade markets will open, and the Browns will explore every option available to them. They have cap space to work with, especially if they make some moves to create additional flexibility. Veteran quarterbacks will be available, and some of them will be intriguing options for a team desperate to stabilize the position. The question is whether the Browns will be aggressive in pursuing those options, or whether they'll take a more conservative approach and focus on building around Sanders. Based on their history and Andrew Berry's comments, aggressive seems more likely. And if they do sign a veteran or trade for a younger quarterback who's available, Sanders could very easily find himself as the backup entering year 2, which would be a devastating setback for his development. Fourth, Deshaun Watson's status has to be resolved. Berry said Watson is expected to be on the roster in 2026, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll be the starter or even active on game days. Watson hasn't played in over a year and required 2 surgeries on his Achilles. There's no guarantee he can still play at an elite level or even an average level. But his contract is fully guaranteed, which means the Browns can't cut him without eating a massive dead cap hit that would cripple their ability to build the roster. So Watson will be there, taking space and money and attention, adding to the circus atmosphere that already surrounds the quarterback position in Cleveland. How Shedeur Sanders navigates that dynamic, competing against a former Pro Bowler who's making exponentially more money despite not playing, will be fascinating to watch. It's yet another layer of difficulty added to an already impossible situation.
Sanders himself seems remarkably clear-eyed about his circumstances. When asked about his offseason plans, he said, "Be with the family, then get back to work. Connecting with the guys earlier, just overall getting better, looking at everything that happened this year, what transpired, and going into next year with a fresh mind." That's the right mentality. Focus on what you can control, spend time with family, get better, and approach year 2 with a clean slate. Sanders also said he learned what I like, I learned what I don't like, and I know what I'm seeing and what I don't see well. I learned a lot, mentally, physically, emotionally, and everything. I think mentally it was how to deal with feelings when things weren't going your way. That emotional maturity, that self-awareness about the mental challenges of the position is encouraging. Sanders understands that being an NFL quarterback isn't just about physical tools. It's about mental toughness, emotional resilience, and the ability to handle adversity without letting it destroy your confidence. He learned those lessons the hard way in 2025, and he'll need every bit of that knowledge to survive what's coming in 2026. The reality that Shedeur Sanders faces is brutal and unfair, but it's also the reality of the NFL. He was drafted in the 5th round by an organization known for quarterback chaos. He spent most of his rookie season on the bench watching inferior players get opportunities while he held a clipboard. When he finally got his chance, he played behind one of the worst offensive lines in football with no weapons and no support system. He showed enough talent to justify optimism, but made enough mistakes to give the Browns an excuse to move on if they want to. He finished the season on a high note with back-to-back wins, but his general manager still won't commit to him as the starter.
His head coach was fired one day after the season ended, and the players learned about it on social media before anyone from the organization told them. His father posted a cryptic message that may or may not have been about his situation. Sources are speculating that he might be traded before he even gets a second season. A new coach is coming in who will have massive influence over his future. The Browns have 2 first-round picks that could be used to draft his replacement. Free agent quarterbacks will be available who could take his job. Deshaun Watson will be back competing for a roster spot despite not playing in over a year. And through all of this chaos, Sanders is expected to just put his head down, work hard, and trust that everything will work out in his favor. It's an impossible situation, and Sanders knows it. When Sanders said, "That's not in my hands, and that's not my decision," he was acknowledging a fundamental truth about his current reality. He has no power. He can't control whether the Browns draft a quarterback. He can't control whether they sign a veteran. He can't control whether the new coach believes in him. He can't control whether ownership decides to blow everything up and start over. All Sanders can control is his own preparation, his own development, his own mindset. And even if he does everything right, even if he has the perfect offseason, even if he comes into training camp looking like a completely different player, it still might not be enough. Because the Cleveland Browns don't make decisions based on logic or patience or long-term thinking. They make decisions based on fear, desperation, and the constant pressure from an owner who demands results immediately without understanding what it takes to build sustainable success. That's the environment Sanders is trying to survive in, and the odds are stacked against him in ways that have nothing to do with his talent or his work ethic. The most heartbreaking part of the press conference was the resignation in his voice when he talked about his future. This is a young man who has been confident and outspoken his entire life, who grew up as the son of one of the most famous athletes in the world, who starred at Jackson State in Colorado, who believed he was a first-round talent that fell to the 5th round due to circumstances beyond his control. He came to Cleveland thinking he'd get a fair shot to prove himself, to show the entire league that passing on him was a mistake. And in many ways, he did exactly that. He earned the starting job, he showed flashes of brilliance, he won games down the stretch, he improved week over week. But none of that matters if the organization doesn't believe in you, if the general manager won't commit to you publicly, if the new coach wants to bring in his own guy, if ownership is already looking at the next shiny object in the draft or free agency. Sanders has done everything asked of him and more, and he's still on thin ice. That's the Cleveland Browns in a nutshell, a franchise that chews up young quarterbacks and spits them out, then wonders why they can never find stability at the position. Deion Sanders' cryptic social media post takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. It's time for new things. Maybe Deion was talking about new opportunities, new beginnings, new chapters. Maybe he was subtly suggesting that Shedeur's future isn't in Cleveland at all, that the firing of Stefanski is just the beginning of a larger organizational upheaval that will eventually sweep Sanders out the door along with everyone else. A whole new mindset is warranted and must be established right now. Maybe that's Deion telling his son to mentally prepare for whatever comes next, whether that's fighting for his job in Cleveland or starting over somewhere else. We're gonna win this game of life. Maybe that's a father reminding his son that success isn't defined by one organization or one situation, that the journey is longer than any single chapter. Whatever Deion meant, the timing of that post, less than an hour after Stefanski was fired, suggests he's very much paying attention to what's happening with his son in Cleveland, and he's trying to provide whatever support and guidance he can from afar. The reality that Shedeur Sanders might not even make it to training camp as the Browns' starting quarterback. If Cleveland drafts a quarterback in the 1st round, that rookie will immediately be anointed as the starter, regardless of what Sanders does in the offseason. If they sign a veteran free agent, that player will likely get the first crack at the job based on experience and pedigree. If Deshaun Watson somehow looks healthy and capable in off-season workouts, the Browns might feel pressure to justify his massive contract by giving him another shot. Sanders could very easily enter year 2 as the backup, or the 3rd stringer, or even get traded to another team before he ever takes a snap in 2026. That's how quickly things can change in the NFL, and that's how little job security a fifth-round rookie quarterback has, even after winning his final 2 starts of the season. Sanders knows all of this. That's why his responses in the press conference were so measured, so careful, so focused on things he can control. He's not going to publicly criticize the organization or demand guarantees or make bold declarations about his future. He's going to keep his head down, do his work, and hope it is enough. Because what else can he do? The truth is that Shedeur Sanders' message to the league in that press conference was shocking, not because of what he said, but because of what he revealed about the Cleveland Browns organization. He revealed that they don't communicate with their players. He revealed that they lack basic professionalism and respect. He revealed that they're not committed to developing young talent or building for the long term. He revealed that it's every man for himself in that building, and survival requires focusing on individual improvement rather than collective goals. He revealed that even after finishing the season with back-to-back wins, even after showing growth and potential, he still has no idea whether he'll be the starter next year. He revealed that his fate is completely out of his hands, subject to the whims of a new coach he hasn't met and an ownership with a track record of making impulsive decisions. And he revealed all of this not through dramatic declarations or emotional outbursts, but through calm, measured, brutally honest answers that painted a picture of an organization in complete disarray. That's what made his press conference so shocking, the quiet acknowledgement that the Cleveland Browns are exactly what everyone has always said they are, a dysfunctional franchise that can't get out of its own way.
So where does Shedeur Sanders go from here? The answer is uncertain, which is exactly the problem. He'll spend the offseason with his family, work on his game, stay ready for whatever opportunity comes next. He'll watch as the Browns interview coaching candidates and wonder which one will believe in him. He'll follow the draft process and wonder if the Browns will use that 6th overall pick on his replacement. He'll monitor free agency and trades and wonder if a veteran is coming in to take his job. He'll see Deshaun Watson working his way back from injury and wonder if the Browns will feel pressure to play him based on that massive contract. And through all of this uncertainty, Sanders will have to maintain his confidence, his focus, his belief that he can succeed at this level, despite playing in an organization that seems determined to prove otherwise. It's an impossible ask, but it's the reality of being Shedeur Sanders in January 2026. The Cleveland Browns just created another chapter in their never-ending quarterback disaster, and Shedeur Sanders is the latest protagonist in a story that never seems to end well. He broke his silence after the Stefanski firing and revealed more about the organizational dysfunction in that single press conference than most players reveal in entire careers. He sent a shocking message not through what he said, but through what he exposed about how the Browns operate. And now he's facing a future that is completely out of his control, subject to the decisions of people who don't know him, don't owe him anything, and might already be planning to replace him. This is the NFL at its cruelest, and Shedeur Sanders is learning that lesson in real time. Whether he survives, whether he thrives, whether he even gets a second season in Cleveland remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the Browns have once again managed to turn a promising young quarterback's career into a question mark, and Shedeur Sanders' shocking message in that press conference was the sound of a player realizing just how precarious his position really is. This story is based on Shedeur Sanders' official press conference comments from January 6, 2026, statements from Browns GM Andrew Berry and owner Jimmy Haslam, reports from CBS Sports insider Jonathan Jones, Deion Sanders' social media posts, and publicly available information about the Browns' coaching search and offseason plans. Sanders' future with the Browns remains uncertain as the organization begins its search for a new head coach and evaluates all options at the quarterback position for the 2026 season.